Hello, this is Julian Lage, and I'm here with my friends from Guitar Center, and we're talking about my main Telecaster these days, a 1966 Fender, by way of Danny Gatton through some other channels. This is the main guitar. Over the years, I've played a lot of Telecasters. I've owned a lot of Telecasters. Some old, some new, always referencing different eras. And I was looking for one to be built by my friend Alex Whitman at TR Crandall, my home guitar shop in New York. And he builds fantastic guitars, and I love them. And I said, you know, Alex, this is just make, you know, at this point, you know the weight I like, you know the pickups I like, you know everything. And, you know, let me know when it's ready. So some time passes, and I was playing other guitars at the time, and I got a call from him. He said, you know what, I'm working on your guitar, but a 1966 Fender Telecaster just came in, and it's got a kind of cool provenance, and I think you should come check this out. We're pretty sure this was put together by Danny Gatton and his brother in the greater DC area. There are some telltale signs of which I wasn't privy to them. I think the fret job was a little bit of giveaway. It was a little bit blunt, and in a way that other Danny Gatton Teles that he put together kind of had that signature. It also, and I think probably of greatest note, it had a different pickup than I've got in it today. It had this, what was basically the shell of a 50s Charlie Christian pickup, but it didn't have the 3-bolt mounting bolts. It was kind of Frankenstein to have what I believe was a ceramic magnet. And it's our understanding that maybe Danny's brother put that pickup together. Again, this is all just, you know, bits and bobs of stories I've heard, but that's our sense, is that the two of them put this together. And the combination of the weight of this body with what I believe is a maple cap neck, with that pickup, it was kind of like right away, I felt like this was the perfect jazz Tele. What does that mean? You know, there's no one thing that's perfect for every player, but it was clear. It wasn't overly muscular. It had a brilliance to it that there's no other way to say it. It was just really charming. Like every note was like, oh, God, that's gorgeous. And maybe of note in why Alex was keen to get my ears on it was that all of these properties were very clear at a low volume, because I don't play terribly loud. I took it on the road pretty immediately. I played a bunch of shows with it, with Joe Lovano's band. I did a European tour with my trio with it. And then what I struggled with was noise. You know, for me, the Village Vanguard in New York is it's the altar at which us improvisers really, you know, flock to. One of the things I've always noticed is that it's the noisiest room on planet Earth as far as electricity goes. And a lot of that has to do with what I believe is a refrigerator at the pizza place above us. So you plug in anything that's not humbucking and you just have a 60 cycle hum, and it's good luck getting rid of it. So I've struggled. You know, here's this room that I love playing in, but I never found the right guitar. And I was speaking with my dear friend Robbie Lee about this, and we were talking about early Epiphone mini humbuckers, early 60s ones. And that's what this is. We put that in this and took out the Charlie Christian pickup, which is so good, kept it in a safe place. And what I found was that this kind of did a similar thing as the Charlie Christian Frankenstein pickup, but without the noise. And it was just a little more utilitarian for my needs. And at the end of the day, I think that is part of it. You know, half the battle is you want a guitar that you want to play, that you're inspired by, but you also want to not think about anything but the music. And by installing this pickup, it didn't take us too far off course from what I think Danny and his brother were piecing together at the time. So this is the main guitar these days. So Danny Gatton is in many respects synonymous with the Telecaster in terms of being a bolt of lightning, you know, as a musician, as a creative force, whose vehicle was often the Telecaster. And when you hear him play, when I hear him play, you hear the whole history of the guitar coming through. And when I say the whole history of the guitar, that includes the banjo, you know, and it includes acoustic guitars. It includes American traditional music and includes all the tributaries of guitar playing. It's everything. And Danny possessed, I never knew him per se, I was before my time, but he clearly possessed such a degree of genius and brilliance that he could act as a conduit for all this information, and then it could come out of a Telecaster. His style of playing is obviously to me, it's obviously very different than how I play. There's a ferociousness and a speed thing and a velocity thing that's just astonishing. Though we don't play anything alike, I derive great inspiration from him because I want that bolt of electricity that he's got, and I have to find it in my own way. But myself, along with everybody else, is still trying to get that thing. I should also say that, of note, Danny Gatton played with such a sense of poise. Now that word to me is really important when it comes to the Telecaster, because if you are overly gregarious in your movements, it's fine, it's great. There's nothing bad that happens. But if you are ultra laser-like with your movements, that goes for the left hand, the right hand, but also your breathing and your body and your legs and your everything, as Danny was, you can elicit a sense of clarity that is blinding. And he was such a master of efficiency and motion. That dichotomy of efficiency with explosiveness is why he's kind of the archetype for this sound. And there's many players who have a version of that. But in particular, Danny was obviously coming from a different constellation of elements. So I think I'm quite charmed by the fact that this guitar has any connection to him. This particular Telecaster does a really cool thing, especially at low volumes. There's a delicacy, but there's kind of a puffiness or a feltiness to the notes that I think this just handles beautifully. I'll play a few things, especially in the lower register, to demonstrate that. And then when you get into the higher register, you get kind of what I would think of as more of a traditional crystalline Tele thing, but this one doesn't ever spill over into being ice picky. If anything, the plectrum I'm using and the way I pluck is much to my chagrin is what makes it that way. But the guitar, it'll go there if I push it, and if I remember not to overdo it, you get some of those lower properties, those lower dulcet, felty properties in the higher notes. Now, of utmost importance is how these registers interact with one another harmonically. And so I've been struck with how this guitar has a beautiful way of kind of balancing out chords all the way up the neck. You can get a sense of it if I play some stuff like that. There's an interesting phenomenon. I consider myself very much an acoustic guitar player. I think myself as that's home for me, in the way the acoustic guitar radiates sound in this kind of omnidirectional way, and the way it radiates that sound while you're holding it or while it's in your orbit. I mean, that to me that makes a lot of sense. I go, yeah, that's it. When it comes to electric guitar, it's always been challenging for me because the amplifier is functioning as that resonant cavity. So I'm playing it here. The sound comes out there, and there's a lot of things that can go wrong between those two worlds. I can push the guitar really hard at the guitar level, only to be dissatisfied with how that's behaving at the speaker level. I say it as if it's a problem. It's wonderful. It's part of the joy of learning how to play electric guitar. But there is another phenomenon at play, and I think this is something I've thought about a lot with regard to the Telecaster. An acoustic guitar, no matter what, a good acoustic guitar, I should say, are the ones I favor. They always have a low resonant kind of agenda. And so even if I'm in the higher range of the acoustic guitar, I'm hearing the sympathetic resonance of the low strings, open or mostly the open strings. So sound kind of builds from the bottom up, from the low frequencies to the top frequencies. So you've always got great stability on the high strings because they're buoyed by the low strings or the low resonance of the strings. Even if they're not being hit, they're being sympathetically resonated in a vibrant, great acoustic guitar. Now, Telecaster doesn't quite behave the same way. There isn't a whole lot of low information to kind of linger, you know. My experience often with the Telecaster is that the most prominent voice is somewhere in the middle of the guitar. The D and the G strings, whatever their character is, you can usually hear when you play in higher notes or when you play lower notes. The only way I can describe it is it's almost like the middle of the guitar is what pulls all the sound towards it, you know, or you could reverse it. You say the middle voicing of the guitar shares and radiates its sound up away from it. But whatever it is, there's this kind of center that just the instrument possesses natively. One of the challenges and what I'm always trying to understand is how to recreate the acoustic experience where your high notes are buoyed by the low resonance. And though that might not be happening natively on the guitar, this is where you get into the realm of counterpoint or multi-voice playing where you have a higher note ringing and you play something lower to give the impression that that note has the support of the low resonance. So I'll give you a very basic demonstration of it. Here's without the support of the low. Here's with a little bit of support from something a little bit lower, and the notes might change slightly. Here's more low information, plus the high information. That little progression, that addition of lower support, for me gets me home. You know, it gets me back to, oh, wow, I'm hearing the whole orchestra. Now, there's one other component I'd like to add to that because I just think about it constantly, which is atonality, meaning you have the notes in the scale, you have the notes in the chord, but you can add these colors that will make things feel as though they're exhibiting a richer sound, even if it's played quietly. I'll give you an example. If I take a C major chord and I play it with a little force, well, let's hear what that sounds like. When I play that, when I hear that, I hear all sorts of resonant frequencies, but they're all in the key of C and they're kind of collapsing onto themselves. You know, there's a cannibalization. The sound is both big and also very hyper-focused. As an experiment to play something that's more atonal at a quieter volume and compare and see which one feels louder, which one has more impact. This is just what I do at home when no one's looking. So I'll play this. Got it. And then I'll play this at a lower volume. Then I'll play this. Then I'll play this. And then I'll play this. Then I'll play this. And I'll record myself doing that, and I'll go back and I'll see what has impact. My experience is that when there's a complexity, not for complexity's sake at all, ever, but when there's a complexity of dissonance and consonance and timbral adjustments, things can pop out of the guitar at a lower volume, and you are spared some of the collateral damage that you get when you push a guitar louder than it wants to be pushed. So you get bigger impact through harmony than you might if you're just whacking away, playing at full velocity. Because of the Telecaster being kind of a neutral sounding board for this, I spent a lot of time doing this on this guitar to see what I can get to speak, since volume is not my objective. So just these are some of the things that help me connect this guitar to the world of acoustic music. I'm obsessed with timbre. I really am. I think it's what I'm most excited about. And this particular pickup, this early Epiphone mini humbucker, for those who have spent time with, old Sheraton or any host of guitars, Rivieras, and there's a lot of guitars that these pickups found their way into. Those who have spent time with it know that it's kind of a cool mystery pickup. There's great clarity, but there's also a fuzziness of PAFs and that kind of sound. And there's a certain compression to the notes where when you hit it harder, it doesn't bark, it just kind of saturates a little more. And that can be a really beautiful sound. It can be, especially in the kind of music I like to play, it can be a nice way to kind of blur the worlds of electrified guitar with acoustic double bass and an acoustic drum set or acoustic piano, or these instruments that are not coming out of a speaker. Here I am with an electric guitar. It's almost like I got this laser beam of sound, and I'm always trying to diffuse it somehow. Not necessarily through reverb, but through touch and through pickups. Though I don't really ever play in the middle position, I'll show you what this particular combination sounds like. So this is an old Epiphone mini humbucker. This, as my understanding, it's an earlier 50s bridge humbucker, rather single coil pickup that they put in. Here's the neck. Here's the middle. Here's the bridge. As I hear it in this moment, I really like that middle sound. Since I play with a pick, I've always found that the middle position, it amplifies some of the clackiness of the pick in a way that I can't seem to get around. But when I hear other people play in the middle position, I go, oh my God, it's perfect. Why don't I do that? You've got, two locations, and you get more air, the guitar sounds less tight, but my particular technique hasn't ever seemed to lend itself super well to that, or at least not with the vocabulary of playing that I play in. But that can always change. Here's to growth. I would say that in my experience of playing Teles, I wasn't ever really looking for a 60s style Tele. I don't know why. I was missing out. But I think I grew up in the Blackguard Tele sphere. Chunkier necks, a darker neck pickup sound. I think I just felt really like that was the thing to do. In discovering this guitar, I reconsidered my stance on it. This particular neck is so comfortable. It's what I understand to be kind of a rather common C-shaped neck from the 60s. The guitar isn't heavy at all. I want to say it's somewhere in the mid-6s, maybe 6.7 pounds. The most important thing is the weight of the neck compared to the body matters. And Once it's all put together, I can't tell you the difference. I knew one guy who could tell the difference, and he was right. He would pick up a Tele and he'd go, oh, the neck is this much and the body's this much. I don't possess that ability. On paper, this is too light of a Tele for me. And the neck is too small for me. You know, all these things that you come to think as are your real touchstones, it's all out the window. What I think the neck profile offers, for example, is that I'm not thinking about my left hand. It's comfortable, right? So that's just one thing out of the way. What the weight does is, yes, it doesn't have a ton of weight behind notes, but it also decays in a really elegant way. Notes on this guitar, they just like fall like mist when you're done playing it. They just kind of scatter in a way that I think only a guitar this light would kind of do. When I've played it harder in louder situations, it holds up. It doesn't collapse. Another feature is I'm playing with 12 gauge strings on this Tele. So they're a little heavier than I've played in the past. And I think they also hold up their end of the deal. They bring some of that rigidity to the sound that maybe gives a phantom sense of mass, you know, you could argue. I also like that it's not a precious guitar. I think one of my greatest joys is when you see players play guitars that they've fashioned together in a way that's meaningful to them. There's nothing puritanical about this. This is not a perfect guitar from that era. It's perfect to me because it's gone through its life cycle with Danny and his world. It's Lord knows where it was after that, and now it's in my world, and I've already changed it from what it was. So there's something about the evolution of this not being something I'm not afraid to do anything to this guitar. It's not about that. It's just about getting the job done. We're hosting this workshop in Brookfield, Wisconsin, and in addition to having teaching and teachers be the heartbeat of it, I want to have guitars and vintage guitars in particular be a part of it. So many of the lessons I've learned and continue to learn about music come from the conduit of the instrument. In other words, when I was very young, I was lucky to spend a lot of time with David Grisman in the Sonoma County, San Francisco Bay Area. And David, being the mensch that he is, he would send me home with guitars almost like they were professors. Like, take 2 weeks with this 1920s L5. Tell me what you learned. Go take this. They were all acoustic instruments. Take an old Dreadnought. Take a parlor guitar. Take a Gibson. And I took that to mean, okay, he's saying understand why the music that was made on these guitars was made on these guitars. And it always stayed with me that that's no small part of this whole journey. And in the spirit of that, at this workshop, we're going to have a host of vintage instruments that are not there to be idolized, but to be played. And it's kind of like a petting zoo of sorts. And it's my hope that we'll have a handful of Telecasters there so you can understand 50s and 60s and 70s, humbuckers, single coils, see how they interact with amps. You know, get to know what this part of the machine is about. I'll definitely have this there, along with a slew of other instruments that we'll be talking about and having people play and learn from. On the spectrum of Telecasters, this is rather neutral. It's not the brightest, it's not the darkest, it's not the loudest, it's not the quietest. There are things about it that are kind of reliably right in the middle of that spectrum. Now, to me, that's great news because it means there's not a bias that's weighting it towards something that maybe I'm not fond of. I'm not going to be hedging my bet going, oh, I want to hit the low E, but if I do, it's going to explode. It's like, no, it's going to be within the realm of musicality. This used to be a couple of trees, and now it's a guitar. And it takes a while for guitars to know that they're not trees and to know that they operate in this other capacity. For me, this guitar seems to know itself. There's a real centeredness to it, and it's disarming. If anything, I'd say this Tele more than others I've owned, it holds me the most accountable for what I'm playing on it. There's kind of a cool thing that I spend a lot of time doing, trying to play solo electric guitar. Usually it's at home. I don't do this live very much at this point. And consider the differences between the electric guitar as a solo concert instrument, meaning one where you feel like all your needs are met, the whole spectrum is there, just like you would with a classical guitar or an acoustic steel string. How does that experience compare to the guitar as a supplemental instrument? And this is something that electric guitar, by and large, in an ensemble, is there to supplement frequency ranges. You know what I mean? We're not playing the whole time. We're not the whole story. We contribute things, and that's great. But this particular Tele, I've spent the most time with playing as if it's not there to supplement. It's the whole story, and it's not the guitar's responsibility to work. It's my job to meet it where it's at. This is a very fun guitar to play. It's a very musical guitar. And I think it's had a rich life thus far, and I feel grateful to be the steward of it at this point. And I look forward to playing it more and learning from it, frankly.